Hi, it's Paul Loxton here. In this video, I'm going to explain what the sharp angle close is and how and when to use it to close the sale. I'm also going to explain what to say if your attempt to close using the sharp angle close is rejected. So what is the sharp angle close? Well, it's a closing technique that uses a customer question as a basis for, as a springboard for closing the sale. So the customer asks you a question about your service or product. Does it do this? And the sharp angle close response is, if it does, do you want to proceed? So as an example, somebody might be buying some insurance cover and they might say, if I travel abroad on business, am I still covered? The sharp angle close would be, if it does that, if it covers you, do you want to proceed? Or another example might be a company entering into some kind of a service arrangement with another company. The customer question might be, is your help desk operational 24/7, 365 days a year? The sharp angle close response would be, if it is, do you want to go ahead? So when should you use the sharp angle close? Well, if a customer's asking a question, they're showing interest, I'd say that's a buying signal. So it seems pretty reasonable to me to use that buying signal as this springboard I mentioned to trying to close the sale. However, think about the following three things. First of all, think about timing, whether it's too early to close. And hey, I know about that adage, always be closing. But I'm also familiar with the risks involved in trying to close where you haven't really engaged with the customer, established some credibility and rapport, or fully identified their needs. If you're trying to close too early, there's a definite risk that the customer's going to feel that you're really just trying to close the deal rather than really look after their interests. Now, if you've been talking for some time and you have established rapport, credibility, maybe you're involved in some kind of head-to-head negotiations, that's probably a good time to use the sharp angle close, because the close then seems like an attempt by you to resolve everything to everybody's satisfaction and to move things on, rather than purely to take advantage of the opportunity with the customer asking a question to close the deal. So think about timing. The second thing to consider and ideally find out is whether or not the question that the customer has asked is really important to them. Because if you try and close based on something that isn't important to the customer, their brain is going to say, well, not really, no. Well, why should I go ahead based on you confirming that something that really isn't important to me is available or is in place? They may be just making conversation with you. They may be kind of ticking off really minor things on the peripherals of their checklist. So don't proceed unless you feel, or ideally you know, that the question they're asking is something that's important to them. The third thing to consider is whether or not the customer might feel a little bit kind of manipulated by this close. Think about it like this. 1 minute they're asking a question and, the kind of the next second almost, you're putting them in a corner saying, do you want to go ahead if the answer to your question is yes? Now that might make the customer feel a little bit tricked. So what you might want to consider is kind of softening the approach a little bit by doing two things. One is just lengthening the process a little bit, and the second is by showing some genuine interest in the question that they ask. So try this approach. Customer question: does it do whatever? Your response: let me talk a little about that and also answer your question. Can I just ask you a question first, please? Is that something that's important to you? Customer responds, Yeah, I guess so. Your response: yes, it does, to answer your question directly, and then elaborate a little bit. A, because you said you would, but B, because you're showing interest in their question. Then say, does that answer your question? Customer responds, yes. You then move to close. Great. Shall we go ahead? So what if your attempt to close using the sharp angle close is rejected? Well, let's assume first of all that you've used what I call the really sharp angle close. So you haven't really considered any of those three things I mentioned earlier, and you haven't softened it. Okay, no problem. But let's imagine you've used the sharp angle close without that consideration or the softening. Well, you need to work out what it is that's getting in the way of the close. So is it the timing? Is it that the question that the customer's asked wasn't important? Or is it that they feel kind of a little bit, or maybe even a lot, manipulated as a result of the way that the sharp angle close is structured? Now, once you've worked out which of those it is, you kind of need to move on from there and address whatever the issue is. Now, if you did use the softening approach that I suggested and you were still rejected, find out from the customer what it is that's preventing them from proceeding. So say something like, what is it that you'd like clarification on, please? Look out for more videos in my series on closing, including videos on how to develop a closing mindset, what the 5 key skills are for closing, and videos addressing specific closing techniques. Good luck with this.